Welcome to Live Town Hall. My name is Michael A. Charbon. Our show topic today is about the 2018-2020 Brampton City capital budget. And when you say a capital budget, that's a big expenditure where a city says to their constituents, this is the amount of money we're going to spend in the next couple of years to supply all the needs that you, as a person who lives in Brampton, will need. First thing I want to do is introduce our two guests. Interestingly enough, the budget tomorrow at 4 p.m. will be approved by Brampton City Council. Brampton Focus extended an invitation to all the councillors, and they were busy. I mean, we came up with the date here to do this show quickly, so we acknowledge that some of them were busy, but I suspect that they want to have it passed and dealt with before they come and discuss. So we appreciate them taking the time to at least respond to us. And when you talk about people who want to talk about business, who better than the Brampton Board of Trade? And they were kind enough to come forth and be a part of this show so that you, the folks in Brampton, can understand, I would say much more clearly, that's very bad English, about what the budget is going to do for you and what it's going to cost you. So to start, I want to introduce, first of all, Heather Strati. Heather is she's a partner with Deloitte Private Group with over 20 years of experience in various industries, including professional services, private partnerships. She works with a diverse group of clients, ranging from private companies and private health companies and large public situations. So Heather does a lot of going into a company, and I said before you were the mercenary. You come in and make things work. You're the person who makes it work. So Heather, we thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
We're looking forward to your insight in how this all works. Many of you would know Badar Shamim. He's the former chair of the Brampton Board of Trade. Badar come to us with some great credentials. He graduated from Brock University when he had more hair, thinner, when he was very younger. He's a certified financial planner. I was just saying that, I was joking. And he actually he holds an investment manager's designation from the Canadian Securities Institute, and he provides tailored wealth investment placing and advice to high net worth individuals and businesses with a global perspective. And he's just started a new venture, which is all about what you do, how do you do it, how do you protect your money, how do you move forward. So who better than to have Badar here, particularly with his insight in the Brampton Board of Trade, to lend some insight. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here. We want to say thank you to Brampton Focus, who made this possible through Live Town Hall, Paul Vicente, Don McLeod, and Fazil Khan, who are the folks behind the scenes who are making this all happen. We encourage you to participate. Live Town Hall is a live and interactive show. You can go to facebook.ca/Brampton Focus. So facebook.ca, and if you pull up Brampton Focus or Live Town Hall, we will take your questions and we will ask Badar and Heather the questions, and you can ask questions of the budget. We have a fairly detailed layout here, and we'll try our best to answer your questions and give you some insight on what's coming up. Just to start off with, I want to kind of set the table, as one would say. One of the things that the organization or the leadership group did in Brampton was they wanted to establish some objectives. They wanted to say that in the 2018 to 2020 budget, they wanted to make sure that your safety is a priority. They wanted to improve your ride. They wanted to have better education for better jobs, lively community spaces, and more active Brampton. So those are the things that they want to achieve through the budget. They had some strategic points and things that they wanted to make sure that they addressed, which was good governance, a move to connect, smart growth, and strong communities. And finally, when you talk about a budget, particularly of this magnitude, I mean, you're looking at an operating budget of $678 million, a capital budget of just over $500, so you're over $1 billion that the city of Brampton is spending. Their strategic plan was boiled down to 6 salient points, and they're talking about regional transit connections, a university, health partners, Riverwalk, urban centers, and a planning vision. So that, in a nutshell, is what they used as the over 50,000 foot purview of what this budget is supposed to represent. The Brampton Board of Trade released 8 questions that they wanted to have answered and addressed from a business perspective, not only business, I mean, business is important because that's who the Brampton Board of Trade represents, but the people in Brampton. So we're going to go over their 8 questions, and hopefully we'll be getting some of your questions and start to dissect a little bit of the budget. That, by the way, as I said, tomorrow in City Council at 4 p.m., they will be passing the budget. So you'll have an opportunity to see your government in action. So the first point, Heather and Badar, that Brampton Board of Trade brought up was about providing better transparency, allowing people the ability to interact. They posted the budget online for multiple weeks, and they've had discussion. Did this council and this group, I mean, Harry Schlang, the new CAO, did they achieve this? Did they have a better level of transparency?
So, Michael, I think I would have to say that over the years we have seen the transparency aspect improve. Having said that, there is still room for improvement. So they took a lot of measures in terms of engaging the Brampton community beforehand. One thing that I think they can still improve on is how the budget was reported online and how it was presented in the chambers. So we're asking for going forward for them to provide us line by line itemized details on the budget instead of just giving us one lump sum amount.
Heather, is that a fair appraisal from your standpoint?
I would totally agree. I think kudos for having them actually posted online. So I think they're trying to be more transparent. But I think for folks looking at the budget to really understand what's driving the budget and why the costs are what they are, having that level of detail gives a regular individual a better chance of actually understanding what the cost makeup is.
Isn't there a danger to open the kimono, as one would say? I mean, in a situation like that, I'm not a budget guy, I'm a creative guy. So I want to see the line item on the top of the 6. I don't want to see all the 6. One counselor, it was very interesting, they asked how many people are being hired, because the cost of labor comparative to, here you go, the cost of labor in the capital budget is $392 million, and the other is $286 million. There's a huge disparity. Is there a pro and con with that? Do you really need to micromanage that, or should it be presented in a more, I don't know, pedestrian way, if you will, pedestrian that I could understand? I don't need to see, all the percentages of old age pension contributions and all the rest of that. Wouldn't you want to see how many people are being added or eliminated? Is that fair? That's
a fair comment. As a matter of fact, I would say that, the kind of constituency we have in Brampton, where we do have a highly educated, highly professional community, providing such details can only provide more credit to what the City Hall is trying to do. So I don't see it as a negative. I don't think that our community members would nitpick on small things and would go after the city staff for doing stuff that is in the betterment of the community as a whole. Having said that, it will infuse more confidence, if anything else, if that information was readily available.
So one of the other points that was brought up was considering the taxpayers' harsh economic situation currently. I mean, we look at some people who are living still hand-to-mouth. We look at Ontario being the second largest capital debt other than California. We look at pay not going up. Well, it will eventually, January 1st, minimum wage, but that is a cascading effect. Do you think, Heather, that in this budget, which was an increase of 3.7%, that they took into consideration some of the harsh and hard times that people are still experiencing?
So the city has a number of objectives and initiatives underway. So there's an understanding that there's a need for fundraising, right? So that's one piece of context. But at the same time, I'm not clear that they have considered all of those factors from an individual perspective. As you say, salaries have not gone up for the last number of years. Inflation, has been petering, but these tax increases are 3 times inflation. Individuals are still...
Inflation is 1.2%. This is a 3.7% increase, right?
Right. And so, and then as you say, with the minimum wage going up in January, that's great for those who are getting it. At the same time, we saw even Sobeys announced 800,000 worth of jobs lost at the office level. So there's a trickle effect that we do anticipate to come through. What does that mean for our residents? Many of which are in those office positions, some of which are in the frontline store positions. So there will be some benefiting, some not benefiting. So all of those puts and takes, I'm not sure have been fully considered.
I've heard from a lot of independent business owners, mom and pops as you would call them, and independent business owners owners and mom and pops represent 80% of the generated income that employs our people. Some of them are saying with the increase in the minimum wage, they will not be able to have as many people working. And they've also said that the minimum, the employee that they're hiring, it's not a job for life, it's a job, an entry job. Anyways, that's so it's interesting. One of the other points that the Brampton Board of Trade brought up was saying that aligning tax increases from a municipal standpoint to inflation. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you said to a city you can't raise it more than inflation, which is 1.2%, I wonder how radical a thought that would be for.
Indeed, I doubt you're going to see it. But having said that, I think it's something we can definitely aspire to work towards. Over the last number of years, we have seen the city of Brampton increase taxes to the tune of 3.5% on average, and that is going to continue from what we're hearing from the City Hall in the near term. I think we all want to see the infrastructure in the city keeping pace, the growth.
A modern city costs money, the politicians are going to tell you. If you don't anticipate, we got a university coming, we need transportation, we need housing. It costs money to run our city, and you have to spend money to make money. Isn't that the moniker?
That is the moniker, indeed. And so it boils down to, again, should we be looking at better efficiencies in how we do things? Should we be looking at alternative ways of raising revenue instead of just levying the taxes? Perhaps a review of the service model the city adopts. There could be some findings in there that could allow the city to offset some of the revenue generation liability that's being passed on to the taxpayer.
It was interesting to watch some of staff in a presentation like that. Staff takes the budget and they present it to the councillors and the mayor. And it was interesting. Several of the staff said, we've consolidated what we've done. We've used economies of scale. We've eliminated one position. We've maintained this. So they're really making an effort to do that. And it's interesting that when you look at some of the other aspects, they've spent more money because they've had to.
Right.
Now, I guess that's a value judgment, right? There was another point that the Brampton Board of Trade brought up. It was called adjust user pay to service levels. So when we're talking about service, does that mean that if someone wants to go skating in Gage Park, they got to pay $3 to hold their skates? Or when Susie's taking her kids, who she's already paid for swimming lessons, she's going to have to pay $2 to park her car? Is that a formula or a tool, as they would say, to generate money? Is that something we should consider?
So our thought on that was not necessarily, every single service having increased user fees. So to your examples, the point is we're recommending an assessment, a review. So looking at all of the possibilities around user fees and where some user fees maybe should be increased and others not. But actually doing that exercise to have that information and to understand better where the opportunities are to increase the revenues while keeping the others flat.
It was interesting. Madam Mayor Linda Jeffrey made a comment saying about AMO, the Association of Municipalities. They were talking about generating tools to be able to get more money.
Okay.
So how do you get tax money into the system without taxing the people who live there? Intriguing idea. Well, Madam Jeffrey said about a VAT tax or a user tax or however you want to call it. Basically, if you stay in a hotel near the airport or you rent a car near the hotel, you pay an extra percentage which goes directly to paying either there's a financial gap. There's a couple of other areas where they could apply that to. So I did a little research, and it's interesting, actually. 22 states in the United States do that in a lodging basis. And 38 states do it in a car rental. So, for instance, if you're going to stay in Georgia, you pay an extra $5 a night to stay in a hotel near the airport in Georgia. $22 in Portland that you pay on top of that. I mean, if anybody's traveled to Europe, and I know you have as well, and obviously you have, and so have I, when you go to the UK, you'll pay a VAT tax, a value-added tax. Is a tool like that something we should consider in Brampton?
As long as it doesn't compromise the competitiveness of the jurisdiction with the surrounding jurisdictions, I think it's something that we should definitely contemplate. So a proper economic study in terms of what the revenue benefits as well as what the potential disadvantages could be, should be undertaken by the city, I think, along those lines.
Yeah. Certainly, it's heavily used in touristy areas, right? Like even in the Caribbean islands.
But it's a quiet secret thing. Oh, by the way, what's this extra tip?
When you go to get your bill at the end.
Yeah. It's not something they say up front.
It's something to consider, certainly, because then it's as we have folks come in, as opposed to the folks that are living here and working and so on, right? So, and you can start it off with small percentages to start, again, based on that review and that analysis.
So Live Town Hall is an interactive show. We need questions from you and your inquisitive mind. You could go to our Facebook page. So it's facebook.ca/Brampton Focus, or you can just search Live Town Hall and it'll get you there as well. We welcome your questions and your comments. And I'm interested to find out about how many of our viewers have actually gone online and looked at the budget and see what is being proposed here, which is, it's interesting. Basically, where they're going is 3.7%, and they're saying there's three components to the property tax when you start talking about how much money. So they're saying that in 2018 there's $70 million in combined internal and external debt financing. When you start talking about debt financing, I get a little chill. Because Ontario is in debt. Are we living beyond our means? When does a city say we're not going to do any debt financing? I can see the politicians yelling at me, saying, you can't run a city on that. You have to invest in the future. But what about that person who doesn't want to pay the 3.7% increase on their taxes this year? What do you say to that person?
So, the conventional wisdom when it comes to taking a look at sovereign as well as sub-sovereign debt is that as long as the jurisdiction is benefiting economically and the overall economic output as a result of undertaking debt is allowing the jurisdiction to remain within certain percentages, then it's not a bad thing to do. And I think the cities are no different. So quite frankly, if we take a look at our economy and calculate the additional benefits of taking on the debt within reasonable levels, and we can justify it based on the debt to GDP ratio that the municipality might have, I think it's a reasonable thing to do. There's other simple evaluation tools that are available too. You can simply take a look at your debt situation and compare it with your surrounding neighborhood. I think Brampton as a whole is in a good shape from that perspective. Historically speaking, we haven't actually utilized debt as a tool to support growth. And again, within reasonable limits, I would say that it's something that we should.
I would agree.
utilize.
I mean, every business even will look at proper leverage.
Yeah, but a business, Heather, would say if I'm going to borrow $100,000, they have a plan to pay back that $100,000.
Correct.
What's my return on investment? So if I'm going to borrow that $100,000, I know what my nut is to pay the interest and pay a piece off it. Right. How much business do I have to make over the course of 3 years to eliminate that debt?
Agreed.
I never see that in any city budgets. I never see that plan in a provincial budget. I never see them say, this is how we're going to pay it off.
Yeah, but perhaps that's what we need to do. So the reality is that with Brampton being the third largest municipality in the GTA and the ninth largest in the country, our positioning going forward is going to be as a global commercial hub where people and goods are going to move readily. In order to run a city of that stature, you have to have better intelligence in terms of measuring the impact of the financial decisions you're taking. So I think the real question is, why are we not calculating such matrices and sharing them again with the audience? Because that will instill more confidence in the audience, the stakeholders, to be able to allow the city to make those decisions.
What's your exit plan to the debt? If you're just joining us, my name is Michael A. Charbon. You're watching Brampton Focus's Live Town Hall. We're talking about the 2018-2020 capital budget for Brampton. Joining me is Ms. Heather Strati. Heather Strati works for Deloitte Private Investment and Business Group. 20 years she's been in the business and helping people and businesses get it straight. And Badar Shamim, the former chair of the Brampton Board of Trade. He's a certified financial planner and also an investment manager here, talking about the budget. Again, we asked both the councillors and staff if they were interested in joining us. They all had previous commitments, and I think wanted to pass the budget first and let it happen before they came in and commented. So we appreciate the Brampton Board of Trade coming here and discussing with us. The vote is tomorrow at 4 o'clock on the 4th floor of City Hall, where you can see the vote and you can see what's going on. Harry Schlang was here. I had the opportunity to sit down with him, and it was very interesting to listen to what a CAO perspective is, and he was very engaging. He wanted to see Brampton succeed. He said that in his presentation to council, he said that they're aiming higher and thinking big, and they want to transform Brampton. They want to focus 2016 and 2017 on an internal transformation. I mean, there was quite turmoil on the last election. There was many questions, so you got to say he inherited a heck of a job. Outline, if one would say. They want to maintain roads and bridges and buildings, faster fire response. They want to ensure community safety, enhance buses. They want to see what Brampton wants. They talked to about 10,000 people. They engaged 10,000 Bramptonians to add their point in what they wanted. Do you think that was a good tact? Do you think they were successful in implementing some of the things that Bramptonians wanted to see?
So I think it's still work in progress. I have seen well, as a matter of fact, as a Brampton Board of Trade, I'm a former director or current director and former chair. I was part of an initial consultation even within the Brampton Board of Trade membership. So that goes back to the city again envisioning what it will look like in the next 15 years. Mm-hmm. In order for you to actually keep pace with the kind of population growth your city and your region is going through, you have to have a blueprint. We're very lucky that we also have, in addition to Harry Schlang, which is a very experienced bureaucrat, we also have Ian Beasley, a world-class mastermind in terms of planning.
Texas, United Arab Emirates, he's helped design cities. Vancouver, he's been...
St. Petersburg, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think such consultation can only assist in the city actually doing the right things in terms of making sure that the emphasis is on doing things that the community wants. The vision is to have a city that is a living, breathing city, and the community is part and parcel of that vision.
So here's paying the piper, as they would say. The budget increase for 2018 is estimated at 3.7%, 5.4% estimated in 2019, and 4.6% in 2020. So if you're someone who's making the same wage you made in 2012, and we're 2000 practically 18. Are you scared when you see numbers like that?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. And that's precisely where you need to have a look at the alternative sources of generating revenue. So for an average Canadian who is, as you said, employed, works all day long to put food on the table and make sure that there's shelter on the roof, there's roof on the kids' heads, asking them to increase their tax bill to the city by 2.25% while their earning is not necessarily keeping pace, that is not really fair.
It was is interesting at the time of Hazel McCallion, where when Mississauga was just going nuts and there was lots of development, they didn't spend any money on infrastructure, but they kept all the taxes down. So everybody says Hazel was an angel. We never paid more taxes. Now Bonnie's come in, Bonnie Crombie, and she's had to face the music because there's been a lot of infrastructure spending and things that weren't maintained. Brampton is a little bit the same here when you look at that. We encourage you to chime in. It's at facebook.ca/Brampton Focus, or you can go to Facebook Live Town Hall and post your questions.
Maybe if I'll just comment around, again, I've mentioned earlier that the city has a number of things underway, a number of initiatives, a number of objectives, great ideas in terms of, the plans that you mentioned earlier. Mm-hmm. What we're proposing or pushing for is just more of a balanced approach. Everything needs to be balanced. So, while they do need more funds to achieve those goals, which will all benefit each of us in Brampton, business and personal, in the long run, it's the short-term kind of paying for that cost. So again, looking at the alternative methods of raising funds and other offsetting savings. I know we were talking about the timing of the debt earlier. I know you were asking at one point around the borrowing. Well, the budget for 18 actually assumes that some borrowing will occur and has an interest cost in that budget, which I believe was about almost $7 million worth of interest. But the way that the process works, that funding, that lending would not be approved for about 18 months. Mm-hmm. So it would not happen in 2018. In fact, it would be in 2019 at best. So the interest cost could be taken out and reduced the proposed increase.
When you look at the inflation rate of 1.2% and you look at this increase of 3.7%, that's 3 times inflation. If you're not getting any pay raise, okay, let's take for granted that eventually you're going to get $15 an hour. I would say that the average person, I think they said in Canada, there's 19 million people who actually pay taxes. Of the 35 million who live in this wonderful land of ours, only 19 million pay taxes. And the top 3% pay 70% of all the taxes. So those people are not making $15 an hour. They're making way more than $15 an hour. So their nut per month is definitely different than mom and pop average, as one would say. But 3.7%, 3 times inflation. When do we say, as a society and as members of a municipality, to our governing body, that we want a balanced budget, a real balance, not the Liberals' balanced budget in Ontario. No sly there, but that's a whole other show. We want a real balanced budget with no increases. And if you're going to borrow money, we want an exit strategy.
Yeah, Michael, interesting way to pose your comments. One of the things that Brampton Board of Trade has been very regularly advocating about is FDI attraction. So private sector investment into Brampton to offset some of the tax liability that currently is being carried on by the residency. I think the stats are that roughly, in Brampton, roughly 35% of the community actually works in Brampton. 65% currently commutes on a day-to-day basis, which means that on the commercial and business side of things, your tax revenue is not necessarily carrying as much weight as it could. So I think Brampton Board of Trade has done a lot of work in the last number of years, along with the city of Brampton, in terms of positioning Brampton as a place of investment in Europe, in the United States, and across emerging markets, India, UAE, Turkey. As a matter of fact, tomorrow we're hosting 22 medium to large size businesses from Turkey here in Brampton. They will be visiting Brampton City Centre.
So councillors would say, you're not going to attract business unless you have the right platform. And so we need to invest in our platform, and our platform is Brampton. And if we don't invest in our platform, we're not going to attract finance. It's a chicken and the egg, right? But look at this survey. How many people want a tax increase? Well, that's hello. Do you like to go to the dentist and have your tooth drawn? I mean, it's always, I love to use this example. People who walk into the dentist say, I hate the dentist. I got a toothache, I hate the dentist. I hate the moment that they leave the dentist, thank God I went to the dentist. So when you look at that, increased by inflation, maintained services, 57% says no.
Not surprised. That's exactly what our members would tell us too.
So why doesn't the phone ring off a councillor's desk then? Whereas not one councillor said in that meeting, I think we should look at a balanced budget and an increase which would be equal to inflation. Now, I could just imagine they're pulling their hair out now. But when do we as a society say that enough is enough? I mean, maintain taxes and cut service, 28%. That's a third. Almost, that are saying, so what do you need to cut to make it work, and what do you need to add to attract business?
Yeah, so this goes back to the service review, right? So you're going to have to actually go over things item by item and say, okay, is this still relevant to today's day and age? Can it be delivered in a better fashion, utilizing newer technology? And at the same time, so, I hear you about the chicken and the egg analogy. Having said that, I don't think that any community out there would sit and wait until all their infrastructure was up and running before inviting investment in. So I don't think that work ever stops, whether it's the 22 businesses that are coming to Brampton tomorrow to take a look at Brampton.
So let's say one of those businesses decided to invest. So they're going to build a manufacturing plant here, or they're going to have a distribution plant to be able to take their product here.
Correct.
Are we equating that investment into the property tax, that the invisible property tax that they're going to pay, which was not there before?
Absolutely.
We're not talking about a specific tax on them specifically, but just regular.
But general affordability as well.
Right,
so
okay,
if we
that's a
had,
better way to put it.
so general affordability for our residents. So at the end of the day, if more work is here, they're not spending time and money on the GO train to get to downtown Toronto, for example, then they could actually spend a bit more on property taxes if that then paid for a rec center. There's a cycle here. So having the lowest in the region, the lowest level of employment as opposed to residents leaving the city to go to work. We need to fix that ratio. We have employment lands that are designated. We need to continue to do that to then attract the businesses, keep our residents here, reduce the traffic, and also reduce the cost to the residents from that point of view. You then have the revenue on the tax side from the companies. And then you also have a bit more wiggle room from a resident's perspective to actually spend on more things locally, which, by the way, also drives local business that they will then spend going out for lunch close to their new employment center. So that drives revenue for that little mom and pop shop, for example, which then feeds revenue into the city. So there's so many goods that will come from that creation of employment.
Absolutely. So I have to make a correction. Harry Schlang, for a year and a half, solicited over 20,000. I was reviewing my notes. 20,000 people interacted. And the strategic priorities that they talked about, which was transforming and moving forward, transit investment, fire and emergency services, recreational facilities, university education, long-term learning, and reimagining the downtown. All those sound smart and right, and I applaud the way that they put them down. The stat says that 40 people a day move to Brampton. 40 people a day move to Brampton. Right. And Brampton is one of the fastest growing cities. So when you look at transit, I mean, I'm going to take one of these budgetary items here. 27 million people used Zoom last year. That's a 17% increase. No transit organization in the world makes money. Even if they come to a 50% usage rate, nobody makes money. That's something that you can see investing money in. They're going to be adding 62 operators. They're going to be putting 31 new buses. They're going to continue to build 32 buses for the Zoom transit. They're going to connect everything. We need that. That's something that we have to spend money
Absolutely.
on, right?
Absolutely. You don't have a choice. 40 people a day is adding to at least 15,000, 16,000 people a year. And if you're already spending time commuting with 65% of our labor force on our highways in rush hours, imagine what it will look like in another few years.
So it's called Improve Your Ride. They're going to be investing $150 million over 3 years into making the service better. So we can't gripe at that. I mean, it has to be. But look at the infrastructure gap. Now, the infrastructure gap, that's stuff like buildings and roads and playgrounds. Well, actually, playgrounds, because of the 150 Canada celebration, Brampton is back up to speed with that. So all the playgrounds are all good. But you look at the cascading dollar figure that comes up to, in 2025, there will be a deficit, meaning there has to be $600 million worth of investment to keep up with infrastructure. Where's that going to come from?
Well, let's talk about the reserve.
Absolutely.
Okay, there's an interesting point. So explain to the folks at home about the reserve. There was an annual reserve, or this year, 2017, I think it was $16.5 million.
Yeah, so the budget's going to have a surplus, forecasted to have a surplus of $12 million.
Correct.
12? Okay.
12 and change.
Okay.
And that's going to be, and that's the annual picture. That's going to be added to the cumulative reserve, so the reserve that's already been building over the last number of years. And so the reserve will be $505 million. So that's a significant amount of money that's already well above the city's target for a reasonable reserve. We all know that for rainy days, for problems that arise, for projects that were unexpected, reserves are needed.
That's
absolutely. So the question then becomes, how much is enough? What's the right level? And the 505 currently is above that targeted value. So
where that money sits in an invisible account somewhere with the City of Brampton people written on it, and that keeps accumulating. Could that one day take that infrastructure gap?
Absolutely. From my point of view, and Badar, you can speak up too, or comment. But when we talk about the university, we know we're going to have to match the government's funding to pay for the university build out and whatnot. So the reserve is already there. We don't even need to borrow necessarily. Again, depending on the values and whatnot. But to me, that's what that reserve is really earmarked for. Large projects like that will make a huge, huge dramatic change to the city.
Absolutely. And just to complement what you have just said, it's also the timing of actually adding to that reserve. So my understanding is that the region gives you about 18 months notice before they come to you asking for money for any of the large infrastructure spending. So if we're collecting taxes now just to build up our reserves,
well, the McCarty report said there was $1.8 billion needed over the next 10 years.
Okay.
Or 1.2 billion. What's a couple of hundred million to support infrastructure? So they said basically that there should be a 5% levy put on Bramptonians to pay for this infrastructure gap. They've added 2% basically. So there's a 3% lag somewhere. Now, what people are saying is that's $200 million gap happens. Where should we use that safety fund and pay stuff off now? Is it more, you guys are financial whizzes. Should we get rid of it now instead of carrying it over? Should we get it now?
So one of the things you're not taking into account is the additional economic growth and the resulting tax revenue generation you're going to see.
But that's a bonus if we get that, right?
No. So, for instance, immediately, once the building process of the new university goes into play, you're looking at economic impact of roughly $600 million to it. The operational economic impact of having the university in Brampton over the coming years is roughly $300 million a year.
Right. And
300 million.
1,800 jobs.
Sorry, I'm trying to get the questions here, and I'm not seeing them on my Facebook page here. So I'm not ignoring you. It's because I'm still seeing my. So I'm going to reboot here. So why would you not use some of that money that's in the kitty right now and say we're going to use 200 million of that so that there's no tax increase and that we can eliminate how bad it's going to be for our folks today?
Right, and that's the question that we've raised ultimately.
Right.
So
Right.
when we look back over the last handful of years, that surplus was around, actually negligible. Then it went to, I think, 170 million or so, which kudos to the city for building that back up and getting some safety net in play. And so now, again, at the 500 million, it feels like it's too high, and we could be saving some tax dollars and using that reserve now that we've actually had enough years of safety.
You're a financial planner, and you understand that. Is it not more prudent to say if we pay part of that bill now, for all intents and purposes, the interest rate and all the stuff that carries on afterwards that we would have had to pay to service that is something that we could put back in the kitty again and build the kitty up? It's an exit strategy.
I think the analysis needs to be done on the use of that fund.
That's such a good answer,
Heather. Well, it's true. We need more analysis. At the end of the day, it feels like we talk about
common sense economics. That's what we. I remember when we were watching the election in the United States, they talked about when these people are sitting at the kitchen table on the 27th of the month, and you've got your credit card bills, your gas bills, you've got your insurance for your car, maybe skating lessons and dancing lessons, and you look at how much money is in the bank account. There's no debt financing on that kitchen table. It doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
What are we going to cut? We're not going to have any cable for a little while. You're going to have to walk. We're not going to. When do we get to that point?
Well, I think that's the analysis. I think we've got a good enough kitty, as you said earlier, to use that for some of these large infrastructure projects without taxing our residents more. At the same time, being judicious and very prudent in the use of those funds. You don't want to deplete the reserve too much in case something does come up. Obviously, there's a real and valid reason why that reserve would be needed. But I think that, return on investment and that analysis around the highest and best use of that reserve is what is necessary now to then make that call.
I want the word exit strategy included in the next budgetary evaluation. See, they're talking about investing in fire. I mean, how can you disagree with that? They're talking about training. They're putting a training and communications facility together. They want to be able to add trucks, 20 new firefighters. They're doing so many fire inspections. There we are. Thank you, Fazil. They're doing so many fire inspections. So it's actually interesting. Last year, the fire department did 744 inspections, of which there was 144 which were deemed illegal inspections. Wow. So that's basically those folks that are renting out their basement illegally, and the fire department comes because stuff's hitting the fan.
Right.
We want to invest in our emergency services.
Absolutely.
We want to invest in fire, right?
And investing that ties to the growth that we're seeing in our population and in our residents. So it makes absolute sense to invest in those core services.
And so here's our first question. Sorry, Badar. Here's our first question. Thank you for logging in. Marin says that we pay too much in our property taxes and it should not go up. Rowena's comment is, what's in the budget to encourage more business to come to Brampton? Are there any incentives? I mean, here we go again. Some municipalities offer a reduction in property tax if you're going to purchase for the first little while. Are there any incentives intrinsic to Brampton to attract those Turkish businesses that you're going to have a nice lunch with tomorrow?
No. And the reason is very simple. Generally speaking, if I'm North Bay or if I'm Sudbury, jurisdictions that struggle to attract newcomers and new investments, I would not offer such subsidies. So when you're the second fastest growing economy or the city in the country, and businesses are looking at you as a way to growing their business, you don't have to rely as much on the subsidies. The selling feature is the fact that you have one of the youngest labor forces in the country. You are a growing economy, and from here, you can serve about 150 North American consumers in Canada and U.S.
Interesting. Robert asks about why the mill rate is so much higher in Brampton than Mississauga. Explain the mill rate and why it is higher.
I'm going to have to look that up.
Yeah.
I don't have the answer for that.
I wouldn't be able to speak to the mill rate in particular. I mean, the rates across the school levy, the city levy, the region levy. The region levy, in theory, is the same across. But the city levy is where you're actually seeing...
There was no increase in the schools. Of all the budget, of all the things, there was no increase in the school.
Good point. So it really is an increase in the city rate because of all these objectives that we've talked about throughout the call.
So here are the three components to the property tax. So the city portion is 47%, the regional portion is 37%, and the school portion is 16%. So I don't know how that compares to Mississauga, but that's what's happening.
That's a good question. It's worth exploring further.
Interesting. Well, I mean, and we also had talk a little while there ago where Mississauga was saying that they were thinking of going independent, and and then I've had the pleasure of speaking to the mayor of Caledon, and he has a very, very poignant comment to that, and so does Madam Mayor Jeffrey. So it's interesting. I mean, I don't know. So let's talk about the university. $50 million invested up to now in the university, which is going to be over 10 years.
Yep.
There's $100 million that they're going to invest in the Center for Education and Innovative, Collaborative, and Learning. Again, if you don't educate and transit and you have fire, those are all things that we have to do. A $50 million drawdown. One of the things that they were talking about is how does this money get there? One of the staff stated there was going to $50 million drawdown that you can take from this fund to use it against the school. And the $100 million for this Center for Education, Innovation, and Collaboration and Learning was an external debt issuance, which means we're going to borrow $100 million. Where's the exit strategy?
So again, this is exactly why I said to you, you got to keep in mind that project will actually generate economic activity, and which will result in rising.
Does it then fund that $100 million?
You got it.
Process?
So that needs to be explicitly stated.
Yes.
Yeah, because
if this is what you're borrowing for, then let it also pay that.
See, that would make it, I think, a lot clearer for people to understand what's going on.
Makes sense.
I mean, one of the things that, here's another question. Robert asks, Curry states that when the mortgage rates go up and the property taxes do the same, that will only add more stress to homeowners. Very
Absolutely.
True.
100%.
Yeah, 100%.
And then you add on the increased minimum wage if that's happening. It's like nobody's making any gains. Everything's just going up in increment, right?
Yeah.
That's
and
true.
I'll throw one more thing into that mix. So you think of the middle class, as Trudeau likes to talk about it, and the mom and pop shops that you like to talk about. Those tax changes that they propose, some of which they backed off on, but some which they have not. Those are directly hitting that group of individuals, entrepreneurs across the country. So yet again, it's one more cost that they're going to be bearing in terms of trying to run a successful business, manage their employee base, all those sorts of things.
So people look at what Donald Trump is doing with the tax and America First, and there's a bit of disdain and bad taste in one's mouth, but what he's actually doing is he's utilizing, whether you agree with it or not, the system of Reaganomics is saying that if you lower the taxes and people come here and they pay less tax, you'll have more money in your pocket. You can either invest or you can spend. Either way, it's cash into the system.
Yeah.
This is what we need. We need cash into the system.
Yeah, trying to let the free market kind of take care of itself. Having said that, there's controversy over what Trump's doing because it's certainly benefiting far fewer than it should, and a certain class more so than it should.
I mean that's another discussion that we can have. But I'm just looking at, when you look at what Curry states here about that when property taxes go up and mortgage rates go up, it adds more stress.
Absolutely,
nobody's making any gain. Who cares if you made $15 an hour now? I mean, your taxes and everything went up, right? So one of the other things that had come up, I would suggest, in talking to those 20,000 people that Harry Schlang and the council, when they reached out, it was a year and a half of discussion that they went to Bramptonians to ask them what they thought. It was the illegal second units, and that's putting a lot of stress. And the fire department reiterated that too, because it's not their responsibility, but it's enforcement and bylaw that generally gets shoved with this because they have to do it. So what they're doing now is they're actually identifying a specific task force that's going to be taking care of that. So they're going to look specifically at that. They believe the problem is getting worse. Do you know how many people they believe are living illegally? Is 15 to 20,000 people in these third apartments. Illegal secondary units, so boarding houses, etc. And now, take into consideration with the university coming, there's great potential that that's good. So this is money well spent, some would say.
Certainly, and you think, the risk is not just to the house where they have the illegal individual or the illegal basement apartment, whatever it is. It's to the homes around it as well.
Absolutely.
So if a fire breaks out, if there's a fire safety issue, it really does affect the neighbors just as much.
And from a business community perspective, this is good policy because you're actually also supporting legitimate property owners who are legal renters.
Absolutely.
So if you're just joining us, we're talking about the Brampton capital budget 2018-2020. They're going to pass this tomorrow on the 4th floor at 4 o'clock at Brampton City Council, if you want to check that out. The time now, we're just about under 15 minutes left in our live town hall. Just to reintroduce Heather Strati and Badar Shamim, both of them from the Brampton Board of Trade, here to talk to us a little bit about the budget and answer some of your questions. Also like to thank Brampton Focus and Live Town Hall for making this possible. We tend to always criticize and we don't say enough thank you. So thank you to the both of you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
For being here and talking about this. It's not easy. I like to push, but we need to get answers, right? I mean, that's what we're doing. One of the other portions, or one of the other legs, as one would say, that is part of this new budget, is the Downtown Reimagined initiative, where they're spending $31 million in the heart of the city. They want to redevelop it. They want to have more open space, festival integration, open space, vibrant streetscapes, cycle paths. They want to be able to make the city more vibrant, more attractive. That attracts business.
Absolutely.
That's going to be a situation that's going to attract students when we look at the university and all that. $31 million, is that too much or not enough, do you think?
For the initial studies and for the initial economic impact findings, I think that's sufficient. That should give them enough ammunition to then take to the both private sector as well as public sector to seek funding for the kind of projects they want to pursue.
There's a lot of interest in the vision as well, and so you'll find along the way that 31 will be augmented by private investment, folks who are tapping into that vision and are very excited to see what's coming together.
Absolutely.
Well, there's been a couple of vocal community groups who have said that they want to have a hand in the vision. Some of them have a vested interest. They're developers and financiers and business owners, but those are the kind of people you want to have skin in the game, as one would say, because they're going to make sure it's done right. Hopefully. When we look now, we're starting to get a bevy of questions here. Are you guys able to stay till 8:30?
Okay.
Yes, looking at his watch. Yeah. Are you cool for 8:30?
That's fine.
Okay, thank you. That's good. Yes, we're good to the folks in the back. So when we look at this reimagined or imaging of Brampton, when we look at a hospital, when we look at a university, when we look at transportation, when we look at schools, when we look at the vision of the whole city, what is the cost of that in the end? Is it going to be able to allow people who are here now to still live here now? Because if you ask that question of people who are in the beaches or in certain areas of Toronto, they would say no, because they can't afford it.
Well, it's an interesting question. I mean, I'll say a couple of thoughts, I suppose. I think it's a hard question to answer because we don't have the numbers analysis. You know, if speaking as numbers, if you actually look at the cost of doing all of that, the impact on the market values of homes, can people still afford the homes? There's ramifications throughout, you know, let's say the life cycle of the city that would trickle through from all of that. I believe that if we raise our game within the city, then all of it will actually benefit everyone who is here. So are folks able to stay? I believe that they could. As all these changes are made, I think it has, as I say, a trickle effect through that will allow everyone to adjust along the way. There's going to be benefit for all. And it's just a matter of how the process is managed. And, you know, it's not going to happen overnight where suddenly the values are so drastically different that that we can't afford, you know, what we're doing, that sort of thing.
Well, it's like, what do they call it, combat creep or war creep, where after a little while it goes low. It starts to be a little more expensive, a little more expensive. Your property taxes keep going up. Your house prices go up. Mortgages go up.
But there's a flip side to that, right?
Exactly.
So I know you're going to comment about the university impact.
Yeah, and not just that. I mean, the reality is if you take a look across GTA, yes, it has become costlier for an average person, and especially our younger folks to start life in GTA these days. Having said that, I can tell you, as a financial planner, I've spent a lot of time with a lot of people who are baby boomers who are getting ready to retire over the next few years. And if it wasn't for the real estate boom that we've experienced in the last 10 years, they wouldn't have a whole lot of savings that they could rely on during retirement years. So, to your point, some people will take that capital asset and sell the property and walk away and move a little bit outside GTA and find a more affordable.
Next 10 years would be the largest transfer of wealth.
Correct.
That the world, the globe,
Correct.
has the largest transfer of wealth.
Correct.
Because when my parents bought their house, they paid $34,000.
Right.
Absolutely, yes.
They paid that house off. They had an exit strategy.
Yes.
They both worked. They paid it off.
Right.
That house now, that house now is $1.2 million plus.
Right.
I mean, you shake your head. Okay, maybe it was 1978 when they bought it, but still. Oh my goodness.
Absolutely. And so, you know, you got to take a look at things in balance. I have friends who have taken some of the equity off the table from their real estate in Brampton just to buy a cottage up north. They've downsized in anticipation of retirement. And if that allows them to have a better quality of life, then that's fantastic. So I think a lot of people will have to take a look at their own personal finances, their own personal goals and objectives. I don't envy the millennials one bit. I've said this to everybody. It is going to be a tough go for them to start their life in GTA in terms of finding a property they can purchase.
But their focus is different.
Yes.
I mean, they're not going to be opening a travel agency, that's for sure, because that doesn't exist.
True.
No, but you think of all these things that were traditional within our scope of what we were going to do and what we wanted to do. You know, I mean, even lawyers are going to feel the effect. Wills, you're not going to pay for a will anymore. Everybody has a will now online. And no sly on lawyers, but I mean, it's every single one. They're chipping away.
Automation is affecting everything.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Well, we all want it faster, quicker, for no money.
And no effort.
And pretty much. And we want it all on this thing.
Yes.
And that's all good, but eventually it's going to catch up to us because this thing is going to take over and this thing isn't going to have a job because this thing's going to take over, right? So just a note that any questions that you post on our Facebook page will be posted to the council, to city council, and the city will address them tomorrow. So it's not as if any of your questions aren't going to get answered by us or by what our summation is. It will be posted by the city and that they will address them. So again, we thank you for coming online and asking your questions. You can go to facebook.ca/Brampton Focus or just go to Live Town Hall. Badar Shamim and Heather Strati are joining me, Michael A. Charbon, here on this. We're talking about the 2018-2020 Brampton City capital budget. So another question here is the city making investments in youth to keep them here?
Yes, they are. So as a matter of fact, this whole complex that they want to develop in downtown is geared towards keeping millennials engaged. Millennials engaged. So, Ryerson University, for those who are unfamiliar with it, is a bit of an urban campus. It's not necessarily a traditional university with a huge sprawl. And if you've been to the Ryerson campus in downtown Toronto, it certainly allows for a lot of people to come into Toronto on a regular basis, who then spend the whole day there, eat there, shop there, and so on and so forth. So I think the whole idea of creating a walkable, living, breathing environment in downtown Brampton is to create a similar environment and also to augment the local economy with the youth.
The city's investing $72 million in redevelopment. They're doing 3 recreational facilities, one at Howden, Chris Gibson, and Balmoral. So they're seeing the need to be able to establish recreation centers to take care of our youth and our aged at the same time, and they're investing in that. I mean, that's a great thing to see.
Absolutely.
So Ron asks about, are you concerned in regards to retired people on fixed income? Well,
oh yeah, absolutely.
Reference all of the comments that we've already made.
Right. So you're dealing with old money and established money. I would say there's not too many millennials or ones who come to you are pretty well off. When you see those folks getting ready to retire, do they take into consideration a 3.7% increase on their property taxes? Is that in your paradigm when you're doing your numbers with them? Because inflation is 1.2. Do you use a higher number? You're looking at me weird, Heather.
No, I think it's a valid question because, you do a financial plan. You can speak to that better than I can. But do you really budget for that large of an increase year after year as opposed to some kind of inflationary increase? I would suggest not.
I mean, does my house go up more than 3.7%? I would hope so, because if it doesn't, I'm losing.
But that's also not liquid.
No, yeah. Plus, it's always one thing to say I'm going to sell my house. It's another thing to find a buyer of your house.
I had a meeting with clients yesterday who are in their early 70s, and interestingly enough, to this day, they haven't had an opportunity to sit down and do a written budget.
Wow.
And now that they are drawing from their RIFs and at the same time going to fully retire, I actually told them, I said, you have to have a better understanding of your fixed costs, because to your point, even the fixed costs are going to continue to creep up.
Yes.
And as you go towards managing your nest now, given the market conditions, you can't take too much risk either, right? So I think inflation is going to continue to creep up, and people are going to have to pay a little bit more attention to the expense management side of things.
So Live Town Hall is from 7 till 8. Well, we've got some interesting questions, and we want to continue the discussion. So we encourage you to post your questions. You can go to our Facebook page at facebook.ca/Live Town Hall or Brampton Focus. Either way. This broadcast is brought to you by Brampton Focus. We want to thank the folks at Brampton Focus, Paul Vicente, Don McLeod, and Fazil Khan for putting this all together and allowing us to be here, and also Heather Strati and Badar Shamim for being here and discussing this. We encourage you to put your question in because it is questions from you that make this program interesting for all of us. Jillian says, your house may have increased in value, but some of their wages have not kept in line, and they can't afford the taxes. What should they do? Sell their house and move? Well,
preferably not.
No, we don't want them to move because we want them to stay in. I mean, isn't that the vision? You want to be able to work in the city that you live and be able to take public transit or cycling or walk to work.
Right.
Right?
Actually, absolutely. Like everything we've talked about around driving a livable and sustainable city speaks to all of that.
Yeah.
So we don't want people to feel that they need to pick up and move. And I've actually heard that from a number of residents, that taxes are getting too high. They are on fixed incomes, being retired individuals. We shouldn't be facing that as residents in the city. So that's why we're talking about all of these various changes throughout the course of this call today, to kind of combat against some of those increases and protect our residents.
There has been some transitioning out of Brampton to communities around Brampton that have a lower cost of living and lower property values and taxes. So I would assume that there will be some attrition, to be realistic. But having said that, wide majority of us, again, this goes back to not just the tax side of the equation. This goes back to the whole economic development piece. So we need to focus on attracting new investment on the commercial business side of things, so that we can create some more jobs and get these young people gainfully employed, so that they can keep pace with the higher inflation.
I want to talk a little bit about the budget process. As I said, the leadership group took 1.5 years to talk to over 20,000 people in Brampton to find out what their vision was. And that's when they came up with those 6 points, which was their vision. Their strategic vision was regional transit connections, university, health partners, Riverwalk, urban centers, and a planning vision. We touched on a number of the points that they wanted to do. You guys are numbers people. You look at numbers in the harsh reality of what they are, what they can do, and how they reflect on contributing factors, other numbers. The process by which that this budget was put through was very different. Other times when they presented a budget, they went line by line. It was an arduous task of several weeks of councillors and staff arguing and justifying and making changes, and there was a lot of discussion and a lot of, not discourse, but realistic discussion at many levels.
Right.
In this particular instance, the budget was put online, and it felt like there wasn't as much time for city councillors to potentially consider alternative points of view. Is that a fair comment, or am I overreacting to what some people are saying?
Yeah, no, I think in terms of timing, there's been plenty of discussion. There has been back and forth between the staff and the city. You're never going to have 100% agreement between people in terms of what they want to see out of a budget, right? Having said that, can there be improvements in the way things have been communicated and the way they've been disclosed? Absolutely.
See, Harry Schlang said one of the things they wanted to do was streamline. They wanted to reduce some of the bureaucracy. I think they've achieved that. I think they've made it simpler. They've made it more transparent. I mean, I watched with... I'll reserve my comment on emotion, but there were several councillors who brought up questions that when I listened to what Mr. Schlang and staff had said, I understood it, and there were several councillors that asked a question that I could answer. And you kind of look and you're a little disappointed at some. And, it's because this is a different process. There is an expectation that they do their homework. How much can they really change in the budget? If you're a councillor who is objective to one particular point, I don't want to spend $71 million on this. I think it's too much. How much leeway do they actually have to influence staff to reduce that expenditure?
I think the question might be, if they were to do the research properly and have a good understanding of what's going into a particular line item, can they challenge it constructively that would actually make the staff go back and think about it, maybe, rehash some of the numbers. But I think that kind of process is really where we need to focus the questions to the councillors. Have they done that kind of homework?
In this process, because it's expedited a bit, they moved it up. It's, I believe the last, the former date was December 13th, I believe, and it's happening tomorrow, which is December 6th. So they're speeding things up to compress it.
Right.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, I understand what Harry did in being able to consolidate things, make it easier to understand and transparent because it's put online. But I haven't heard one councillor say, I don't think we should spend that amount of money, you got to reduce that. Not one person said that and made staff go back and correct it.
Yeah. And is that because they agree with the budget as presented?
I don't know,
or
I'm
is it
asking
because
the
they're
question.
not...
I mean, it's easy for me. I mean, it's easy for all of us. We're always armchair.
Well, so again, as chamber executives, we have been privy to a lot of discussion around the future visioning of Brampton. There is no doubt in our minds as community builders, as business community members, that you do need to invest money in while revitalizing downtown core and building the transit. And
I don't think there's an argument here of any of the things that they did that isn't a worthy move.
Precisely.
What one could say, and what some have expressed to me, is the dollar figure that's going against
It's
that.
the timing. Yeah. It's not looking at alternative ways of raising those capital instead of just levying higher taxes.
But so when they came to you and you were privy, when Brampton Board of Trade was privy to some of the budget elements, did anybody in your business association...
Sorry, not the budget elements. I was talking about economic outlook and economic development. So the future visioning from a city development perspective.
Yeah, okay. So I stand corrected on that. Yes. If there was a situation where someone was motivated, be it a councillor or a business, to say, spending, I'm just using a number, spending that $13 million on candy floss, and then they're not doing that. But I'm just saying, how do you motivate both the councillor and staff to say, maybe we've got to pull back on that? I haven't seen any of that. Now, maybe it's all justified, but...
Well, and I think that in part that's why, as the Board of Trade, we go back with our 8 points that
but
you've
they're passing
referenced.
it tomorrow.
They're passing it tomorrow.
It's tomorrow the 6th.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I'm not trying to ask a question that I'm answering myself. But
No, I get your point.
It's kind of like, I didn't hear anybody say, see, I want an exit strategy. Because I've sat at that kitchen table where I've only had X amount. Right. I've had $15 a bill, and I only got a $10 bill. So someone's not getting paid. It's going to be double next month. Right. So what am I going to do? Maybe I've got to say, you're not playing hockey, or we're not having cable, or I'm going to put my phone away for a month. Right. Where is the sacrifice in that? Because the end user, which is the 3.7% of every Bramptonian, is going to pay that weight.
Understood. Yeah. You're absolutely right.
Question.
Well, at the end of the day, to your point around the timeline has been condensed and shortened, but, I think they have heard the concerns. And again, I come back to balance. They are trying to balance out all of the objectives that they're trying to achieve. It is asking for the higher tax rate this year, but, we keep pushing. They're going to approve the budget tomorrow. Then maybe they should have done a bit more homework in terms of listening to some of the points that were raised.
Yeah, I mean, it's a question. As I said, it's always easier to be on this side than on the other side. So, again, I think everything that we've seen, they've thought it out. There is a vision. There is a plan.
Absolutely.
I haven't seen an exit plan, but there is a plan, and that's good. I mean, Badar, you've commented on debt financing, so have you, Heather. So I get that. I don't totally understand it because I live on, this is what it costs, this is what I'm paying, and my objective is to pay it off so I don't have to pay it anymore.
Understood.
So the city responded to our question about the firefighters. The city has 406 firefighters. That means that each firefighter in Brampton serves 101,533 residents, which is huge. And other municipalities like Mississauga is 1,198, and Toronto is 1,038. So you can see how Brampton is using their firefighters, or 406 firefighters, to service more of an area. I mean, that's one of the reasons why they're going to build this new training and communications center. 20 new firefighters are going to be hired. They're going to improve the response time. And they're also talking, which was an interesting thing that what we touched on, was about how many fire inspectors go into places and are able to see illegal residents, and how that's such a huge thing. So I encourage you to take a look at the budget. It still is online. You can go to Brampton City, their website. You can see the full budget. You can see all the elements. You can read what it is. You can also go. There was a stream of the presentation of the budget where Harry Schlang presented it, and staff identified each one of the things, and you can watch your councillors in action. I mean, it was an interesting comment. One of the discussion elements was brought up about going to the province and the federal. We were talking about downloading and about transportation. We need to have transportation in Brampton. We need to connect. Geez, I wonder if the government has any funding options in that for transit. Light rail, $406 million. But
it's never been raised before.
I'm going to tell you that is going to be an election issue. Mark my words. That is going to be an election issue. The connectivity between what Mississauga, I mean, you look at what they're doing and the connectivity, Brampton's got to get in on that. Brampton has to capitalize on that. And now with the motivation of the university coming, I mean, it just means more and more and more.
Yeah, I mean, Metrolinx has a much broader plan, and when it comes to regional goods and people movement. And so, City of Brampton or some of our councillors can argue that perhaps, this is not the right route and we should be looking at another route. But again, the responsibility lies with the council to have that work done beforehand. So when the government comes to you and they say, okay, here's what we're thinking of doing, and here's some free money, and we've already done an economic study, an environmental study, and so on and so forth, you can't come to them at that stage and say, oh, but we would like to explore some alternative routes.
Yeah. Well, I think it's going to be very interesting. I think the university is going to push the city into a realization that connectivity to Mississauga is going to be paramount. And I was totally disappointed when I saw the city initiating a feasibility study of 2 alternative routes that were already put down.
I do want to
$1.5 million they spent. Both those routes were discounted as being non-effective.
I do want to give the credit to the City Council for more vigorously marketing Brampton as a destination. I was driving the other day and I heard for the first time Brampton BIA ad on 680 AM. And that's never happened before because that was part of the dialogue. I remember having a conversation with one of the city councillors, and they were adamant that we will not see any traffic coming in from Mississauga to Brampton. It will be the other way around. And to that, my response was, well, I've never seen Brampton market itself in Mississauga as a destination.
Brampton proud.
Yep.
So an interesting question when you and I love to talk numbers because you guys love numbers. So the region appeal, their increase was 1%. Now that's the whole region appeal. So their level of growth would be the same as our level of growth. Brampton, Mississauga, Caledon, for all intents and purposes, right? So if the growth of Peel and the Peel region adds 1% as their uptick, which is below inflation at 1.2%, how does a municipality justify 3.7% when the region, which is in the same area, we're talking the same water here, is it, I mean, I know what the answer is, and I'm...
Yeah, the city has different responsibilities in the region.
It's not apples to apples.
It's not apples to apples, right?
Yeah.
So the fact is that I think regions will always be a little bit less than the city in terms of the overall capital expenditure needs. But to your point, again, this is all interconnected, right? So what we're saying is, can we grow in a way that is also fiscally prudent? And if we are going to levy taxes, can we set an end time in mind, which would allow us to say, okay, by this stage, we're going to be at a place where not only do we have the right infrastructure, but the economic activity the city is now generating and the resulting tax revenue is more than enough for us to sustain ourselves.
Why wouldn't there be like a rainy day fund? Why wouldn't there be something established that you could put that away? I mean, we all have that. When the furnace goes, it's a $5,000 hit. It's not anything we say, oh, gee, honey, let's save money for the furnace. That never happens, right? That never happens.
Right.
So you got to have that reserve. Right. As a city, would there not be the same responsibility to look at that reserve to be able to pay down the debt? Because that's what's costing you money the most, right?
Well, and that's why we look at the size of the reserve as it stands today, and at the end of this fiscal year with the extra surplus this year, it's $505 million.
So what does that generate in interest payment?
Yeah, so Michael, I was just going to say that.
Or something like that a year, less?
I don't know the percentage carry cost for that debt. What it will boil down to is, are our guys seeing a higher return on deploying the reserve on the capital projects, or is it better off just to pay the debt off and then borrow later on if the need be?
So the region has $2 billion in reserve. $2 billion.
Right.
So, I mean, it was that discussion that I had with my dad way back when. I'm going to go and lease a car. No, you're not. I'm going to go and lease a car. I'll pay every month. No, you're not. You buy a car, you pay for a car, otherwise you can't afford a car. Yeah. You can't drive a $50,000 car for $600 a month.
Right.
It's a $50,000 car.
Right.
For $600 a month, that's illogical.
Yeah.
No.
And yet,
you're going to buy a beater.
And yet, if it drives you to work and you make X dollars, the return on investment, then you do the analysis.
Sure.
Speaking
all that
of
work. If you have the means but you know what happens? What happens when you get laid off?
Yes.
You return
that's
the car.
the risk analysis that you do.
You return, and then you can't work anywhere.
This is true.
I mean, it's an Apple.
Then you take the high capacity transit.
Well, then someone would say, well, then I have to take a bus from Steeles because I took the Huron Ontario from Mississauga all the way up to Steeles and it didn't connect. So I've got to take a bus or I've got to take something because they didn't fix it the other way to get to the GO station that I want to go to all day, 2-day GO. No, but I mean...
Or the Queen Street corridor. There you go.
There are so many questions, and it's
not a simple issue.
No, it is
for
not.
Sure.
And it is very easy. And anybody who puts their name forward and says that they want to run for public office, no, I mean that in all honesty. Yeah. You put yourself out there. Municipal politics is is a completely different animal than provincial or federal, because you've got party, you've got a lot. Municipal politics is really the hard grinding aspect, and the rubber hits the road when you talk about tax increases and passing a budget with vision. At least you got a vision. Thank God you got a vision. At least you know the beginning, middle, and end of the story, and that's so important, particularly with a city like Brampton that has the ability to, like a really good vase with clay, you can really mold it and make it work. Right. The impetus of the university has really motivated people to understand you are going to reinvent your city with this university. And if you dovetail that with transportation, you're going to engage the people who are ready to live here to be even more excited and entertain others to be here. I guess that's all the secret sauce in it all, is it not?
Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely is. Yeah, it all comes together. So, you know, a university that focuses on science, technology, engineering, and maths dovetails perfectly with the existing manufacturing in Brampton. It dovetails perfectly with new manufacturers that might be interested in coming in, setting up a base here to grow in North America, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. We talk about the international students that attend Ryerson as well, and all of the international trade that we're building here in the city.
Well, think of the international connectivity because of the huge immigrant population that we have in Brampton.
We're actually more diverse in Brampton than Toronto. Like, just think about that. Yeah. We are more diverse than Toronto. We are the face of the world. We are an open door to that investment. So bring the students here.
I love that saying, we're the face of the world. Yeah. That's our chair's, incoming chair's tagline.
That's a very, instead of all roads, I mean, I like all roads lead to Brampton because that shows the transit hub, the connectivity to all the routes and manufacturing, and I think that's a very valid, but we're the face of the world. That's
diversity is our strength. You know, it's funny, so at Deloitte we do talk about this, and one of our most recent research papers is around the strength and diversity, and there are a lot of studies that show corporations that have diversity, whether it's in the leadership, the board of directors, the C-suite, and all levels throughout the organization, they're stronger for that. Absolutely. And I see that as a strength of the city. And so leveraging the vision that we've got, pulling in the economic development, pulling in the extra employment, will have all of this cycle effect on raising, as they say, rising tides float all boats. Is that the saying?
That's right.
Right? So if we can build that employment center here, then everyone around us will benefit from that.
Heather, put it on a bow for me here. When you see all this, I mean, we've dissected, we've talked about money, we've talked about vision, we've talked about investment, we've talked about debt, we've talked about services. In your appraisal, what grade would you give this budget, and where do you see Brampton moving forward from this?
So Brampton moving forward, I think we've got a tremendous amount of opportunity. I think the city is poised, and we say this often with the Board of Trade, the city is poised for greatness, is the catchphrase, but it's truly meant. There are so many good things that are being worked on. There are so many good things that are the possibilities that we are working with the city's working on, that we're looking at from a business perspective. So all of that being said, you know, the budget, I think they're trying to balance, again, those objectives with how to pay for those objectives to move the city forward. So, you know, in terms of a mark, I'd probably give it, I'll go out there and say a B+. We haven't really talked about that.
Right? No, we haven't. No, I sprung that one on you. I didn't say I was going to ask you, but that's good.
But you know, it's a good mark. Good mark, and kudos for the development and the progress that's been made. Could more be done? There's always more that could be done. So I wouldn't give it an A+. But
I think Harry has been a driving force. Harry Schlang, I think he's been a driving force, and I think he's really brought it together. The only person that's actually employed by the City Council, interestingly enough. He worked for the City Council. But how would you summarize that? And give us a little bit of a promo about the Board of Trade. I mean, because it is such an important fabric of business that exists in Brampton and makes more business and gives sometimes, they're kind of like the Senate, as I call them, sober second thought. What would you surmise, and what mark would you give at the end?
Yeah, so Brampton Board of Trade is the inclusive voice of our diverse business community. Diverse not just in the sense of sectors that are represented in Brampton, but diverse in our composition. As our chair said, we are the face of the world, and if we are the face of the world, I would say that Brampton Board of Trade is the face of the business community representing the world. So, you know, we go to bat for you when it comes to issues such as tax planning, when it comes to regulatory burdens, amongst other things. In addition to that, we are consistently working on coming new ideas to the table in terms of how best to save money for our members through membership savings. And networking is our biggest piece. And over the last 5 and 6 years, and I know I spoke about it as the incoming chair 2 years ago.
Yep. We had you on
at the same program.
Yep, absolutely.
About the fact that in the world we're operating on,
eat and argue, we call it.
in the world we're operating in, where both the consumers as well as the supply chains are globalized, the regional chambers cannot work in isolation anymore. So, we have gone on to build an international network, both from the standpoint of facilitating, helping, working with the city to bring businesses into Brampton, but also to help our businesses grow internationally.
Of course.
So, again,
a bow on the budget and a mark.
Yeah, we are a city in the making. We are, Heather said, poised for greatness. What does that mean? So when I think about a city that's a global hub of commerce and people and goods movement, I think about Los Angeles, I think about New York, I think about Toronto. Let's face it, if I am in India, if I am in Pakistan, if I am in UAE or Turkey or wherever, people know what Toronto is, what Montreal is. That's where you want to be over the long run.
Positioned.
Absolutely. A lot of people still look at Brampton as a suburb.
Right.
We're not anymore.
Not anymore.
Yeah. We are a big city, and it's going to continue to grow. We're at 600,000 people. We're going to go to 900,000 people.
Yes.
On the Queen Corridor, you're going to have high-rises across Queen all the way to Highway 10 and maybe beyond.
Yep.
Whether we get the LRT up on Highway 10 or whether we do it at McLaughlin or whether we do it on Kennedy.
No, straight up here, Ontario.
It's going to happen. The thing is, it's going to happen.
Yes.
And so it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of
when.
So the budget tries to basically encompass and envision some of that stuff in financial terms. So all Brampton Board of Trade is saying is, given everything else that's at play for the business community, be cognizant of the fact that 2018 is not going to be the easiest year.
Yep.
A lot of businesses are going to struggle.
Yep.
And in that environment, when you'll come back...
Particularly with the minimum wage.
Mm-hmm.
In that environment, the new taxes that are being...
Yep.
So in that environment, when you will come to them and you will say, oh, by the way, have a higher levy on your taxes, you're not necessarily helping the small to medium-sized businesses in the short run.
So how does that affect your mark?
So I think Heather's the accountant, and I think she did a pretty good job actually. I would also give it a B+. There is room for improvement on a number of accounts, but I think we're heading in the right direction.
Yeah.
Badar Shamim and Heather Strati from the Brampton Board of Trade joining us today. Thank you very much to Brampton Focus, to Paul Vicente, Dawn McLeod, and Fazil Khan for making this happen through Brampton Focus and through Live Town Hall. And also thank you to the City of Brampton for allowing us to see their budget beforehand and make it transparent, and having a situation where we can discuss something like this. I think, as you said, the city is ready for greatness. The only comment that I would say, and in my selfish little moment, is that we have to have an exit strategy. We have to have some way to show how you're going to pay for the money that you're borrowing. I think the plan and the vision and everything is great, and if you can engage 20,000 people in this day and age to comment on where they want their city to go, kudos to you. My name is Michael A. Charbon. Thank you so much for watching. We look forward to speaking with you again and hope that you will interact with us. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon.